Put the toy down, son. You're already in enough trouble." The words echoed across the store like a slap in the face. People turned. Phones came out, and in the middle of it all stood a little black boy, no older than 10, frozen between the shelves of brightly colored action figures. He hadn't moved. His hands were still in his pockets, but that didn't matter. To the white store manager standing over him, towering and red-faced, it was already a done deal. "Where's your parent?" the manager snapped. "We saw you slipping something in your jacket." The boy's eyes widened. "I didn't take anything," he said, barely a whisper. A security guard stepped in from the side, already reaching for his radio. "We've got a minor suspect near aisle 7. Notify. Front." "A woman nearby," gasped. Another muttered, "Seriously?" But no one stepped in. The boy glanced around, lips trembling. His backpack was open but empty. His small hands were shaking from fear, not guilt. He looked back at the shelf where he'd just been admiring a boxed Lego spaceship, the same one he'd been saving up for since Christmas. The store manager kept pressing, "Empty your pockets." Now he didn't move. That's when another employee walked up with a tight smirk and whispered, "Want me to call the cops?" The boy backed away. "Please. I didn't take anything." The tension was thick now. Customers stared, whispering. One began filming. "Another one of these kids," the manager muttered, shaking his head. And just when the boy thought he might cry or run, or worse, she arrived. Click, click, click. The sound of heels on tile, precise, measured, unapologetic. A tall black woman in a tailored navy pantsuit turned the corner. Her expression unreadable, her presence instantly commanding. She walked straight toward the scene without hesitation, like she had seen it all before. "Why is my son surrounded?" she asked, calmly. Voice low and even, which somehow made it more terrifying. The manager straightened. "Ma'am, we believe your son was attempting to steal merchandise." The woman's eyes flicked to her son, then to the toy shelf, then back to the man in front of her. "Do you have proof? We saw him acting suspicious. Do you have proof?" she repeated, one brow raised. Silence. The manager hesitated, then gestured vaguely. "Well, we're reviewing camera footage." "Show me," she said flatly. "I'm afraid that's store policy only, loss prevention staff." The woman didn't wait for him to finish. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a leather badge case, flipping it open with a practiced motion. The Golden Eagle. The letters. The seal. FBI. The air seemed to evaporate from the room. She held the badge steady in front of the manager's face. "Special Agent Denise Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This child is being detained without cause, without evidence, and without adult consent. I suggest you rethink your next move." The silence was suffocating. The smirk from the other employee disappeared. The security guard took a subtle step back. The boy looked up at his mother like she was the sun. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. He stammered. I didn't mean we were just... I need to see the footage," she said again, her tone like stone now. And in that moment, everyone knew this was no longer just about a toy. It was about the assumption, the pattern, the reality too many tried to ignore until it stood in front of them with a badge and a mother's fire behind it, because 10 minutes earlier they thought they were handling a shoplifter. Now, they were standing face to face with the FBI. The moment Denise Carter flashed her FBI badge, the entire energy in the toy store shifted. But for her, this wasn't just another protocol moment or a matter of public image. It was personal. deeply personal. Because 30 years earlier, she was the little kid being watched. It had happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon. 9-year-old Denise and her mother were in a second-hand store shopping for church shoes. Her mother, a quiet woman who worked 2 jobs and still cooked every meal from scratch, had found a nearly new pair and was checking for size. Denise, meanwhile, had wandered to the cosmetics section, bright tubes of lipstick arranged like candy. She didn't touch them, didn't even lean too close, just stared wide-eyed, imagining what grown-up Denise might look like someday. She hadn't seen the clerk coming. "She's trying to slip that lipstick into her sleeve," the woman accused sharply, pointing at her like she was pointing out a rat in the cereal aisle. Her mother turned around, startled. "Excuse me?" I saw her. She was eyeing it. Probably not the first time either. Denise's eyes stung. I didn't take anything. Her mother's grip was gentle but firm as she held her hand. "We're leaving." No yelling, no scene, just quiet dignity. But on the walk home, Denise asked the question that would stay with her for years. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her mother sighed, voice low, because yelling makes us look guilty. Silence sometimes, it keeps us safe. Denise never forgot that, but unlike her mother, she refused to be quiet. That moment planted a seed, one that would grow into something fierce. She would go on to graduate at the top of her class, not because she was the smartest, but because she couldn't afford to be anything less than undeniable in college while her peers protested injustice with signs and chants. Denise did it with textbooks and applications. She applied to law enforcement training programs while her classmates looked for desk jobs. She didn't want to file complaints. She wanted to change the system from the inside. Her early years in law enforcement were a grind, often being the only black woman in the room, underestimated, second-guessed, patronized. But she rose, not by raising her voice, but by raising her standards. When she cracked a cybercrime case that had stumped the Bureau for months, she earned her way into the FBI. From there, her career accelerated: cybercrime, counterintelligence, task force, leadership, but nothing compared to the moment she became a mother. When Jamal was born, Denise made 2 promises. 1, she would protect him at all costs. 2, she would never lie to him about how the world sees boys like him. By age 6, Jamal knew what to say if someone accused him wrongly. By 8, he knew not to run when afraid, even if every instinct said to. She taught him to stand tall, speak clearly, and remember, you are not invisible, but you will be treated like you are. Some called it too much. Denise called it survival. So when she got Jamal's whispered call, "Mama, they think I stole something," she felt an old wound rip open. In a flash, her mind returned to that second-hand store, to the way it felt to be presumed guilty before being asked a single question. And she realized with a cold clarity they hadn't just accused Jamal. They'd pulled her 9-year-old self back into the spotlight and humiliated her all over again. But this time, she wasn't leaving quietly. She slipped on her heels, like armor, grabbed her badge, and drove like hell, not just as a mother, but as a woman who'd waited her whole life for this moment. This moment where silence wouldn't save anyone, but the truth and the law just might. The badge changed everything, at least on the surface. The manager, who moments ago was barking orders, now stood stiff, like a malfunctioning mannequin, eyes flicking between Denise's face and the FBI credentials in her hand. The smirk from the younger employee had evaporated. Even the security guard, built like a linebacker, had quietly shifted a step back, but Denise wasn't interested in optics. She was here for facts. She turned to her son, kneeling slightly, so her eyes met his. "Did they touch you?" Jamal shook his head quickly, still holding back tears. "Did you take anything?" "No, Mama. I was just looking." She nodded once. That was all she needed. Denise stood up, her tone sharp now. "Let me see the footage. You accuse my son of shoplifting. That's a serious allegation. So either you have video evidence or you've unlawfully detained a minor. Choose." The manager stumbled over his words. I'm not sure the cameras were working in that aisle. We've been having issues with the system. I'll have to call someone." "You have exactly 2 minutes," Denise said. "After that, I make this federal." The air in the store had changed again. Customers had stopped pretending to shop. Phones were still out. People were watching some recording. A teenage girl whispered to her mom. "She's FBI. That's her kid." The young employee from earlier, now visibly nervous, stepped forward. We're told to watch the younger ones more closely. You know, just in case." Denise turned toward him slowly. "You mean the black ones?" His face flushed. "No, I didn't say that." "But you thought it?" she said flatly. And so did he. She added, nodding toward the manager, "Which is why my 10-year-old was surrounded, interrogated, and publicly humiliated without touching a single item." The manager tried again. "Look, ma'am, we're just trying to prevent loss. It's nothing personal." "No," Denise replied. "That's the problem. It is personal. It's personal to every kid who's ever been told they look suspicious for simply existing. And it's personal to me, because you don't just owe my son an apology. You owe him accountability." She reached into her blazer again and pulled out a small notepad, the kind agents used during field interviews. "I'm opening a civil rights complaint. Your names, please. Full names, job titles." The manager blinked. "Are you serious? Does it look like I'm here to play?" Behind them, the security guard started shifting uncomfortably. Denise didn't flinch. "Let me be clear. You detained a minor without parental consent, without evidence, and under racially biased suspicion. That's not just immoral, it's illegal. And this store is about to learn what it means to answer for that." Just then, a tall woman in a business suit rushed into the scene, likely a regional supervisor, judging by the lanyard and the panic in her eyes. "Agent Carter?" she asked. "I'm so sorry, I just got the call." Denise didn't raise her voice, but it cut sharper than a yell. "Your staff detained my son." "They offered no evidence. When I asked to see footage, I was stonewalled. I'll get the security tapes right now." The woman blurted, "Please follow me to the office." Denise nodded but looked down at Jamal. "First, stay here. Don't talk to anyone." He nodded, eyes still wide. A customer nearby stepped closer. "Would you like me to stay with him?" she asked gently. Denise paused, then nodded once. "Thank you." Inside the office, the air was cooler but tenser. The regional supervisor fumbled with the system, pulling up the feed from aisle 7. Denise folded her arms and watched in silence. And there it was, clear as day. Jamal walking slowly past the toy aisle, stopping, picking up a box, studying it, putting it back. No jacket movement, no pocketing, no hesitation, just a child being a child. Denise exhaled, not in surprise but in confirmation. "I want a copy of that footage." "Today," she said. The woman nodded rapidly. "Of course, absolutely." "Agent Carter, I'm deeply, deeply sorry." "Save it." Denise cut in. "You're not sorry it happened. You're sorry. Who it happened to? Back out in the store, the manager stood awkwardly near Jamal, who now sat on a bench by the entrance. As Denise approached, he opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. "Don't speak, just listen." The room went quiet again. "You will write a full report detailing exactly what led to this incident. Names, protocols, everything. And then you'll explain to corporate why your actions triggered an investigation from the Department of Justice." He looked like he might faint. Denise crouched next to Jamal again. "Ready to go, baby?" Jamal nodded, and the woman who had stood with him gave a soft smile. "He's very brave." Denise stood taking his hand. "He gets it from his mother." As they walked out the front door, the whispers behind them grew louder. "That's the mom. She's FBI." They really messed with the wrong one, and maybe they had. But this wasn't just about Jamal anymore. Denise knew it. This was about every black boy who'd ever been followed in a store. Every little girl who was told her skin made her suspicious. Every parent who had to teach their kid how to survive being seen as a threat. Denise didn't want revenge, she wanted reform. And as she stepped into the sunlight, phone already buzzing with reporters and calls from Bureau Legal, she knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. By the time Denise Carter and her son got back to their car, the video had already started making the rounds online. 30 seconds of grainy vertical footage taken by a teenage customer. No filters, no editing, just raw truth. A young black boy scared and cornered, and then his mother showing up calm, composed, and flashing a badge that made everyone freeze. It didn't take long for the internet to catch fire. Within 2 hours, the clip was reposted by an educator in Oakland with the caption, "They tried to humiliate him." His mama reminded them who they were talking to. By nightfall, it had over 2 million views. The comments came fast and furious. "This is why we teach our kids how to survive, not just behave. The fact that they didn't believe her until she showed a badge says it all. Shout out to Agent Denise. But she shouldn't have to wear a badge to be respected." Denise didn't respond. She didn't repost. She didn't even open the apps. She was still too focused on what came next. The next morning, she filed the civil rights complaint. The footage had made things easier, undeniable proof. But she wasn't stopping at one store. She wanted policy change accountability. Because for every story that went viral, there were hundreds that didn't. Hundreds of kids who cried in silence while strangers made assumptions based on skin. Denise knew the Bureau would scrutinize her every move, but she didn't care. She wasn't going after the company with emotion, she was going after them with law, and she had the leverage now. 2 days after the incident, the corporation behind the toy store chain issued a public statement. Polished, safe, sterile. "We are aware of an incident involving a minor and a member of our store staff. We are conducting a full internal review and will take appropriate action." But the public wasn't buying it. Hashtags like "Datash Jamal was just shopping" and "Dasht Protect Black Kids" began trending. Journalists dug deeper. Reports emerged from customers in other locations, similar situations, different cities. One former employee anonymously claimed that loss prevention trainings encouraged racial profiling unofficially. And just like that, Denise's case cracked open something bigger. Within the week, she received a direct call from a representative at the company's national legal office. "Agent Carter." The woman began cautiously. "We'd like to speak with you, privately, about how we can move forward in a constructive way." Denise didn't hesitate. "I'm not interested in your PR strategy," she said. "I'm interested in your training manuals, your demographic monitoring reports, and your store-wide incident logs from the last 5 years." A pause. We can certainly begin gathering that information. You have 5 days." She hung up. Jamal sat across the room pretending to read, but his eyes were on her. "Are they in trouble?" "Now," he asked. Denise gave a small smile. "They're about to be." Later that week, she appeared reluctantly on a nationally broadcast morning show the producer had begged. And Denise knew the spotlight wasn't about ego this time. It was about narrative. The interviewer leaned forward, sympathetic. "Agent Carter, what was going through your mind when you saw your son surrounded like that?" Denise didn't flinch. "I saw myself. I saw the version of me that never had a badge, never had protection, and I realized that badge only matters to them because they value power, but I value truth, and my son was telling the truth." The clip of her saying that would go viral again this time on every platform. The company scrambled. In a sudden move, they announced a new racial equity partnership, hiring external consultants and promising retraining at all levels. But Denise wasn't impressed, because the staff hadn't just made a mistake. They'd followed a pattern, one that had never been challenged until someone with a title showed up. She didn't want better apologies. She wanted better systems. And so she declined their offer to collaborate on a solution, a phrase that sounded too much like hush money. Instead, she launched her own initiative. It was called Proof Protecting Rights of Our Future. The mission was simple: provide legal and psychological support for children of color who experienced racial targeting in public spaces, not just retail, but schools, transportation, hospitals. The donations rolled in. Parents across the country shared their stories. Lawyers offered pro bono support. Even retired judges reached out, and Jamal. He went back to being a kid, but he walked a little taller. He asked deeper questions. He paid closer attention. He had seen something dark and then watched his mother flip the lights on. He asked one night, "Mama, are they going to stop treating kids like me that way?" Now, Denise looked him in the eyes. "Not yet," she said, "but they'll think twice, because now they know we're watching back." And that was the turning point. This wasn't about one toy store. This was about every system that treated kids like suspects before students, like threats before thinkers. And this time, they picked the wrong mother. Months passed, but the momentum didn't fade. What began as a legal complaint and a personal stand had morphed into something far greater. A ripple that had become a current, pulling long-buried truths into the light. Denise no longer had time to sit still. Between FBI casework and the demands of proof, her days blended into one another, filled with phone calls, town halls, strategy sessions, media requests, and the quiet processing of one heartbreaking story after another. She read every report that came in, not just skimmed, read line by line, city by city, age by age. 7-year-olds handcuffed in classrooms. 9-year-olds accused of stealing their own jackets. 14-year-olds pulled aside at airports for random checks every single trip. Each submission landed like a bruise, and yet she kept reading, because someone had to. It wasn't just the stories. It was the patterns. Most incidents never made headlines. Most families never filed formal complaints. And most institutions used the same phrases to justify their actions: look suspicious, standard protocol, safety. First, Denise had grown up around those words. She was tired of them. So she started sending teams, small groups of legal and community advisors, to sit in on school board meetings, observe mall security trainings, even join parent-teacher conferences, not to cause conflict, but to bear witness, to make it harder for institutions to ignore their own reflection. She didn't wear her FBI badge to those meetings. She wore the proof pin, a simple gold circle with a silhouette of a child standing tall inside. That pin had started showing up on backpacks on lanyards, even pinned to bulletin boards in teachers' lounges, quiet but powerful, a signal we're watching too. One afternoon, as she reviewed a spreadsheet of local youth incident reports, Denise's phone rang. It was a principal from an elementary school in Minnesota. A black boy, had been falsely accused of stealing lunch money. When the boy insisted on calling his mother before speaking further, the school's staff panicked. They had seen the proof logo on his backpack and didn't want to escalate things. Denise didn't smile, but she did breathe a little deeper. For once fear was in the right direction. Jamal, meanwhile, was growing up fast. He'd always been a curious kid, but now his questions had more weight. He'd ask about laws, about rights, about responsibility. He wanted to know how policies got changed, how budgets were approved, how training manuals were written. Denise answered every question, no matter how tired she was, because he wasn't just healing. He was learning to lead. One night over dinner, he looked up from his plate and asked, "When do we know if we won?" She blinked. "Won what?" "This fight." "The one you started." She paused, took a sip of water. "I don't think there's a finish line, but I think when more kids feel safe being themselves, when fewer of them come home scared, when the people in charge stop calling it overreaction and start calling it what it is, then maybe we'll know we're closer." He nodded. "Can I help? You already are." Weeks later, Jamal gave a presentation at school about bias and fairness. He didn't mention the toy store. He didn't have to. His classmates already knew. Instead, he talked about assumptions, about how easy it is to believe the worst when you've never been taught the full story. Afterward, one of his classmates, a white girl who rarely spoke, came up and said quietly, "I didn't know it felt like that. Thank you." That night, he told Denise, "I think that's what winning feels like, even if it's just one person at a time." She agreed. The following month, Denise hosted Proof's first national summit. What started in a borrowed church basement ended up filling a mid-size convention center. The stage wasn't filled with influencers or politicians. It was filled with kids. Kids who spoke about what it felt like to be watched, to be doubted, to be punished first and heard later. Their words weren't angry. They were raw, careful-wise beyond their years. And when Jamal closed the event with a speech titled, "We Were Never the Problem," there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Denise stood in the back listening. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look rehearsed. He looked grounded. And when he said, "They tried to make us feel like shadows, but we are light," something inside her finally unclenched. After the summit, a superintendent approached her. "We want your help rewriting our student conduct policy," he said. "We've been reactive too long. I want to get it right." Later on the flight home, Denise looked out the window. Cities passed beneath her tiny lights in the dark, and she thought about how small things had started, a lipstick tube, a toy aisle, a phone call, and how those moments, as painful as they were, had led to all of this. The work wasn't finished. It might never be, but the weight of it no longer rested solely on her shoulders. She had built something real, and now others were carrying it forward. Healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about refusing to let it define you. And more than that, it was about turning your pain into protection, not just for yourself, but for the next child. The one you'll never meet, the one who won't even know your name, but will be safer because you spoke up. That was enough. That was the beginning of something better. It happened a year later, almost to the day Denise hadn't marked the date on any calendar. She didn't need. To her body remembered it the heaviness in her chest, the quiet edge in her breath. The anniversary arrived not with grief, but with gravity. And so when the invitation came, a request from the city's Department of Youth Services, she didn't hesitate. They were opening a new community center right in the heart of the neighborhood where it all began. Not just another gym or after-school room, but a center built with intention, a place for workshops, legal clinics, mental health resources, mentorship, and creativity. They wanted Denise to cut the ribbon. She agreed on one condition: let the kids lead it. And so, on a bright Saturday morning, Jamal stood at the podium surrounded by kids of every background, boys with backpacks, slung-low girls with braids, and quiet-strength siblings holding hands, and teens with defiance in their posture but curiosity in their eyes. The building behind them gleamed, not because it was expensive, but because it felt cared for. Hand-painted murals wrapped around the walls bearing the words, "You are not the problem. You are the future." Jamal cleared his throat and began. My name is Jamal Carter. Some of you may know my story, but today, I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to talk about what we do now. He spoke not like a victim, not even like the son of a federal agent, but like someone who had earned every inch of the ground he stood on. He talked about fear, about dignity, about how it feels when people expect the worst from you before they even know your name. And then he said something Denise would never forget. They tried to make me small, but my mom taught me that truth doesn't shrink. It grows, and now it's growing here. The crowd applauded not with noise but with weight, a kind of standing ovation that felt less like celebration and more like affirmation. Denise didn't speak that day. She didn't need to. She just stood in the background watching the faces of the people listening. Some wiped away tears. Others held their phones high. A few just stood still, breathing in the moment. After the ceremony, a young girl came up to her. No older than 7, she tugged gently at Denise's blazer and said, "I want to be like you when I grow up, but I don't want to have to flash a badge for people to believe me." Denise knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and said softly, "Then let's make sure you won't have to." That night, as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, Denise and Jamal walked through the nearly empty center. The halls still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. In the main room, a plaque had been mounted on the wall. It read, "In honor of those who stood up when silence was safer. Dedicated by Proof." Jamal stood in front of it quiet. "They really did this," he said. Denise smiled. "No, you did." And for the first time since that day in the toy store, Jamal didn't look like a boy processing the world too fast. He looked like a kid, a little older, a little wiser, but still a kid. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves rustled. Somewhere nearby, children were laughing. Denise took one last look at the building, a space that hadn't existed a year ago, born from a moment of injustice that could have ended in silence, but instead sparked a story, a movement, and now something permanent. Healing, she knew, wasn't loud. It didn't always make headlines. Sometimes it looked like a mural, a speech, a child walking without fear. Sometimes it was a name whispered with pride instead of pity, and sometimes healing looked like letting go. As they reached the car, Jamal turned to her and said, "You think they'll remember what we said today?" She didn't answer right away, just unlocked the doors, got in, and let the quiet settle around them. Then, with a soft smile, she said, "They'll remember what you meant." And with that, they drove off into the evening. Not as a headline, not as a symbol, but as a mother and son who had once been underestimated and now would never be ignored again. What happened to Jamal didn't begin in that toy store, and sadly, it won't end there. But what his mother did changed the direction of the story, not just for him, but for so many others like him. This story reminds us that sometimes justice doesn't come from yelling. It comes from standing your ground, knowing your worth, and refusing to let the world decide who you are. Because healing isn't just for the moment, it's for the next child, the one who's watching, the one who's listening, the one who's learning what power really looks like. So if this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the world we live in, don't scroll past it. Like this video, leave a comment and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Because the world doesn't change when we look away. It changes when we choose to see and speak up.